Hello, hello, hello. Assalamu alaikum. Ji ayanu pakhair agale ni hao chunashumme washmale ohaya gonzaimas guten morgen. Hola, bonjour, privyet, kaifa hal, and a very amazing khush ahmadi to everyone who's tuned into PTV World and are watching World this morning alongside the very pretty, the very wonderful Maha Makhdoom and Shahzad Khan. Hello Maha, how are you today?
I'm good today. I'm very good today, actually. How are you today?
I'm absolutely perfect. In fact, I am very good today too as well.
Everyone's really good today. But no, I wasn't feeling too great yesterday, so thank you so much
No
for
problem.
keeping the fort up.
No problem.
But how was the show yesterday?
I think it went superb as well because
Was it an important day?
because yesterday we were observing International Solidarity Day, and it
Excellent.
was because of the fact that we actually have to work for poverty alleviation, and it was in line with the Sustainable Development Goals,
Excellent.
where we need to drink clean water, we need to have healthy food, education, and then obviously poverty eradication.
Okay, wonderful.
Which I don't know where we are because we have to
Oh,
remind.
oh, okay,
It's all right. So we have been joined by another guest over
And
here,
I guess
ladies and
that-
gentlemen.
Yes.
All
and
right, but
wonderful.
we-
This is the beauty of the live show. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our top stories. Let's look at our top stories, and then we'll start our show.
Let's do it. Top stories coming up. Good morning.
Okay, Prime Minister Shahid Khaqan Abbasi has categorically said that the PMNL government will complete its term and general election will be held on July 15th next year.
Pakistan will co-sponsor a resolution at the United Nations calling for withdrawal of U.S. decision to recognize occupied Al-Quds as the capital of Israel.
And the World Bank has approved a package of $825 million for Pakistan to improve its national power transmission system and enhance health and education service delivery.
Mexicans of all ages are celebrating their heritage and reaping tasty rewards by smashing open traditional Christmas pinatas this holiday season.
That's really fun.
Yeah, I hope that they
There's
do not
candy
really.
inside.
Yeah, I know that there is candy inside, but at times people miss and they hit somebody else's head. Yeah.
Distance. Okay, a group of penguins have adapted well to their new home in Harbin, capital city of northeast China province, attracting crowds of tourists who are swarming to their cuteness regardless of the freezing weather.
Mainly cold and dry weather is expected in most parts of the country during next 24 hours, according to Met Office. Rain, thunderstorm with snowfall over the hills is expected at isolated places in Malakand, Hazara and Rawalpindi division alongside Gilgit-Baltistan and Kashmir. Well, these were the news updates.
Yes.
And I think it's time for me to fold the newspaper and put it back. It's
And
very
now,
useful.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go and look at our public service message for today. And today I will be doing the honors.
All right.
I do most of the time. Okay, so the public service message is in line with our show today. And I did say earlier this week as well, is that we need to be aware of our internal emotions and feelings. There are lots of psychological issues that people can suffer. It could be external factors that trigger it. It could be more internal, but we have to pay attention to it because it can affect our day-to-day lives.
And talking about that, Maha, what I wanted to say over here was that, while we were growing up, so, my father actually used to be the same skin color I am, but he's not anymore now. And it's probably because of the fact that, whenever we were having dinner or lunch or whenever we were together and we were kids, we used to shout and whatnot. So we obviously used to disturb them. But as a matter of fact, he used to say, oh, I can feel something over here, and there's depression and then there's anxiety, but we never actually catered to that because of the fact that we were Rajputs, so-called, and there's nothing which actually can hurt us or damage us as well. But I think this concept over here within Pakistan is very wrong.
Exactly. So we are telling you that you need to pay attention, going to speak to someone, going and getting help. There's no stigma attached to it because if you're better off speaking to someone, then you should absolutely.
And I'm going to share one of my examples too as well. So I was in Lahore, I don't know what happened, but I got a phone call. It was very disturbing.
Yeah.
And after a certain time, I thought that, I'm going to have a heart attack.
Oh, right.
So I
Yes,
rushed,
I remember this.
Yeah, so I rushed to the hospital, and I went over there, and I was like, man, there's something happening to me. And then the guy was like, just relax, take a deep breath and whatnot. And, you know, he even didn't allow me to go to the washroom as well because, you know, it can be dangerous. So I really thought that, you know, it's a heart attack. So my heartbeat was somewhere around 170 or 160, and I was like, okay, this might probably be the last day. So the doctor came in, and he was like, you know, this is something which my younger brother suffers from.
Okay.
It's called panic attack, and you're perfectly all right. And then I was like, thank God, man.
Okay,
Somebody told
so
me
but
I'm
that's
all
the
right.
thing. What Shazad is trying to say is that, you know, don't push it to the point where something is going drastically wrong, because it does have an effect on you physically if you're not dealing with your mental and psychological health. So that's our public service message. And now we have a wonderful show lined up for you. It is in line with this. We are highlighting the issue of depression and anxiety. It is very prevalent. It is rife within Pakistan and the world. We're looking at figures, and we deduced after being corrected that up to 2 billion people suffer from some form of depression and anxiety.
Across the world.
Across the world, because in Pakistan, in England, it's 1 in 3 that suffer. In America, it's 1 in 4 that suffer from some form. So there's a lot of people suffering from it, and there's a lot of people, though, that still negate these issues, that still say that, oh, get over it, you know, take it in your stride. But these things cannot happen, because sometimes, you know, like I said, there can be a chemical imbalance, there can be a hormonal imbalance, there can be external triggers that, you know, there's so much that you're not having any support. So within Pakistan, because of the economic and the social situation, it is a bit more prevalent, but we do not address this.
And even other than that, there's another side to that, ladies and gentlemen, because we're not quoting figures just like that. Mr. Asif Iqbal, who's actually looking after these psychiatric departments over here within Pakistan, he wrote this article back in 2015. Other than that, you know, other than going to the doctor or to a psychiatrist or to a specialist, what we do is we go to a peer, we go to, you know, find our resolve to with somebody who's actually not who he is. So
Exactly.
please make sure that we subject to somebody who's actually very, I think, capable of looking after you as well, and to figure out what the problem is.
Yes, and we've been very lucky. We've been joined by some wonderful guests in the studio to discuss this issue. And I think everyone is a bit on their toes, because there's a lot of psychiatry in the studio. So let's get started with the show.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, on my right-hand side, we have been joined by Dr. Mubashir Malik, who is a psychiatrist, needs no introduction, the master himself. Hello, sir. Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Walaikum assalam.
Welcome to the show. It's been a long time.
Thank you.
Thanks
I
for
missed
being
your
here.
bow tie today. Yeah. Well, it's perfectly all right. And alongside Dr. Mubashir Malik sahab, we have been joined by somebody who's a psychiatrist too as well from overseas. He works in England as a psychiatrist. He's none other than Dr. Muhammad Akmal Makhdoom. Hello, sir. Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Thank you very
Welcome
much
to
for
the
joining us.
show. Okay, so Shazad, we spoke about some figures within Pakistan, but Dr. Mubashir, you know, you've been in psychiatry within Pakistan for decades. What is the situation currently within Pakistan regarding depression and anxiety?
I think you have asked a very important question. First of all, I'd like to make it very clear to the audience that anxiety is a normal reaction to abnormal situation. But then there's grading of this. You cannot achieve anything unless you get anxious about something. But when it becomes too much and it paralyzes you completely, then it becomes anxiety.
Okay.
Depression and anxiety are related. Anxiety can be a feature of depression, but they are two different phenomena. You can't mix them.
Okay.
We will definitely ask about that, but you know, when I was doing my research about depression, Dr. Akmal Makhdoom sahab, so what happened was that, you know, it was stated that the very simplest of the tasks cannot actually be fulfilled. Is that depression or anxiety?
Well, the thing is that both are interchangeable and both coexist, as Professor Saab said, that anxiety can be a symptom of depression and vice versa. So the thing is that although all our emotions, even feeling mildly depressed, is also normal, but it is that abnormal state where you cannot do things. When your functionality dwindles, when you collapse under the pressure of those emotions, that is where the pathology comes. You can be mildly low, as you've heard something, as you said, and you felt as if you're, you know, losing your life or whatever. Now that was an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation, but it was transient. That didn't have an impact on your social life, on your vocation, on your existence at large. But when it begins to affect, you become cantankerous and upset at home, you're screaming at your children, you're sort of abusing people right, left, and center. And when you yourself feel so overwhelmed that you cannot function properly, that's what happens.
Okay.
That's the illness.
Okay, so now this is the thing. Let's get more into the symptoms, because within Pakistan, like we've already quoted the figures, it is something that's very prevalent, and it's something that has got a lot of stigma attached to it. I will move on to Dr. Mubashir in one moment, but within, because you practice abroad in UK, what is the situation for expat Pakistanis living within UK or within America? Do they have a similar kind of pathology to Pakistanis here regarding anxiety and depression, or does it change once they go abroad?
Well, there is a difference between the American symptomatology and the British symptomatology. The problem with the British symptomatology is that the majority of British Pakistani diaspora is in a time warp.
Okay.
They left in the 60s and they still hold those values or those cultures as the prevalent established cultures in those communities. We live in clusters. We live in communities which are reflective of our communities back home or then home in Pakistan, now new home in England. So the symptomatology is like a jinn, bhoot, pareet, afreet, and you talk of peers and you talk of faith healers. One of the largest businesses in the British Pakistani diaspora is faith healing.
Thank God we're not going for exorcism over here.
Well, I mean, that happens there. So, I mean, Professor Saab has done a lot of work on that and research on that and is an expert on that. And, so he might be able to tell us more about
So let's move on to in Pakistan. We have this within a UK, Pakistan community. So what's the situation here within Pakistan?
You studied over there too as well.
Yes, I was at Guy's Hospital, worked with David Stafford Clark, and I'm very, very proud that Akmal, he is son of late mammoth figure Dr. Ajmal, who inspired me also. And Akmal started his psychiatric practice with me at the Institute of Psychiatry, and he has done wonders. I want to tell you, first of all, the global burden of disease, what they call GPD, they say that 44% global burden of disease is due to psychiatric and behavior related disorders. And this is very, very important.
Yeah.
And according to WHO and Harvard University, by year 2020, depression will become the largest second killer after ischemic heart disease. These are very horrifying figures.
Absolutely.
And now we are entering into 2018. So we must know the burden of disease.
But what are
that
those
is coming.
behavioral disorders as well, so that at least, if...
Substance abuse,
Okay.
personality issues, and so many other behavior-related disorders. Even cardiac disease, ischemic heart disease, is also behavior-related, like lifestyles.
Okay.
So depression, anxiety, Akmal very beautifully described, normal and abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation or to normal situation.
Right.
What Shakespeare said very beautifully, pluck from the memory a rooted sorrow, raise out the written troubles of the brain, and with some sweet oblivious antidote, cleans the stuffed bosom of that perilous substance which weighs upon the heart.
Okay.
But depression is a much more serious condition. If I can very briefly describe, it's a disease of losses.
Okay.
Loss of sleep, loss of appetite. There are biological losses, there are psychological losses, and there are social losses.
Right.
Loss of hope, loss of energy, loss of interest in everything in life, and in which the person sees the world through dark glasses, where he looks, when he looks at it in front of him, it's all dark. When he thinks of the past, it's all miserable.
Okay.
and present is horrible anyway.
Okay.
And it might be because of the fact that we're not even living in the present as well. But there's one thing which I wanted to
That's
figure
where
out.
mindfulness comes
Yeah,
in, right?
and what I wanted to ask was that, I think over here in Pakistan, we consider it an ancestral honor not to go to the doctor too as well. Because quite a lot of times, whenever we are sick, whenever we face problems, the statement comes from the parents, "Oh, putra nahi dawaiyan nahi khaida." Or, it's unnecessary to go to the doctor. So how do we cater to this problem as well?
I want to say this. You have raised a very important issue. Mental health is too important to be left to psychiatrists alone.
Okay.
Everybody should know, should be aware, should be literate about mental health. Peers and fakirs are doing it, they do their bit, but they can't grab the whole situation.
Okay, so now I want to build up on what Shahzad just said. It's about, the attitude, because we all know, more or less now, we all know the symptoms to a certain degree of depression. We know when our partner, when our mother, when our brother, when our sister are not in the right mood. We know when something's bugging them. So I guess that level of, intellect is now there. The education is there to a certain degree. I don't know if you agree with that statement, but how do we now then translate that to getting them treated? Because like the figures we're quoting, like the projection of depression and psychological illnesses, it's very bleak. So how do we get people to get out there and address that actually this is part of life, this is not an abnormality, this is something that 1 in 3 people suffer, so it is normal. How do we break this kind of stigma and this, I don't know, cultural block on psychological issues, Dr. Akmal?
The issue is that we have to look at through the glasses of a social view. Everything that you see around you has to have a social color.
Right.
So the social construct of depression determines how you view it.
Okay.
As the Rajput said, that it shouldn't exist.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't exist, only the sword and the honor must.
Yeah.
Then, of course, for a Rajput, it doesn't exist. It cannot exist. Similarly, for those who believe that all the ailments of the spirit are because of evil and the evil effects, then you translate the evil effect into some form of Afrit, Bhoot, Parit, an external figure. It cannot be from within you.
Yeah.
The Rajput cannot have the weakness inside because it cannot project the weakness outside. So for a society which is completely determined by what the male honor, the macho persona reflects, cannot accept the existence of an inner weakness. But the point is that there are 4 general causes. And this is what we learned from Professor Saab and all those psychiatry classes that we learned, is that those 4 are that there is the self. So your personality also determines genetically where you stand.
Okay.
Then your temperament, which is also predominantly genetic, determines how you interact. Your society determines how you react. And then your interaction with your psychological environment and upbringing and so on. So we can separate the nature and the nurture, but then we must merge it, and the social, biological, psychological, and familial aspects are the core determinants.
All right.
Okay, amazing. And on that note, we're going to have to go for a short break, but when we come back, we're going to continue the discussion. How do we address this, and how do we make our lives easier, or the lives of our loved ones easier? And also, I want to also touch upon, this weakness and abnormality behavior. So let's go for a short break, and when you come back, we'll continue our conversation.
Because our guest today decided to whip it along as well. So let's go for a break. Good morning.
largest cultural activity in Pakistan is the annual National Folk Festival, Lok Mela, held in Islamabad in October each year. Over the past 2 decades, this festival has taken on an international flavour, and more than 20 different countries have sent their artisans and performers to participate in the festival. Nationally, the festival has become a thing of pride for artisans and performers who come on their own to participate. Most important of all, the provinces of Pakistan and Azad Jammu and Kashmir put up beautifully decorated pavilions, and visitors have the unique opportunity to see an assortment of Pakistan's traditionally rich culture in the federal capital of Islamabad for an exciting 10 days. An exhibition of artisans at work under the banner of the Heritage Museum forms the core of this festival. Pavilions of each province depict their own regional culture and crafts. The Research and Media Centre of Lok Virsa arranges groups of dancers that perform all over the festival grounds, inviting visitors to join in, and in the evening arranges music concerts from all parts of Pakistan. This festival is a true depiction of the diversity found in Pakistani culture. Fairs and festivals of Pakistan.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. For everybody who just got tuned into PTV World, you watching World this morning alongside Maha Makhdoom and Shahzad Khan. Today we're talking about depression, what causes and how to get free from it.
Exactly, and not just depression, we're also looking at anxiety because they go hand in hand. One can trigger the other and vice versa. And as we've been discussing in the first half, the figures are huge. The future looks very bleak because we are still so resistant to, to accept that there's something beyond our physical ailments. We're talking about cultural, we're talking about social. And, even religion gets brought into it. But the thing is, we've been lucky that, our Creator has given us a brain. He's given us tools to work with. We've got science. We've got all these different things. Now, Dr. Akmal, before the break, you mentioned that, we're talking about, we were using the anecdote that Shahzad is about Rajputs. It was a joke, but it was, it's a good...
No disrespect.
Without any disrespect. But this is not just one caste that believes it. When someone is going through something abnormal, it is seen as a weakness. If they are going through something, they're crying, like you said, they're crying, or they're completely unable to carry out any task. How do we now break free from this archaic way of thinking?
Yeah. The thing is, everything comes through education, everything comes through slow understanding, societal development. The problem is that societies which are still struggling with existential challenges, it's very difficult for them to be thinking of more abstract things. So in our society, whether our society is the Pakistani diaspora elsewhere or the Pakistani nation at large, the thing is that something that you can touch, you can feel, and then can identify and give you pain, your pancreas, your stomach, your heart, your kidneys, your limbs, a fractured leg, you can see, you can relate to it.
Yeah.
But something which is totally amorphous, totally invisible, right? What is anxiety? Do you know that there is no word for anxiety or depression, the illness, in our language?
Oh, really? Didn't know that.
Right?
Okay.
So the thing is that a language that refuses to acknowledge one of the most crucial emotions right?
But I think pareshan is the word which people very commonly use too as well.
Is
But it's not the right word.
Pareshan
I'm
is
just
worried.
asking.
No, good.
Pareshan is very normal.
Okay.
So pareshan is normal, everybody can be pareshan. But when you're suicidally depressed, right, severe depression, you probably require a whole line of, an explanation to do that. So the issue is that it is how society views it. Now, the way I look at it is simple, that the way you get asthma, arthritis, irritable bowel disease, cancer, you get depressive disorder, you get schizophrenia, right? These are, and you get anxiety. These are chronic illnesses, unless they're not
But curable,
treatable.
treatable.
So you must understand that.
Eminently treatable.
Yeah, absolutely. They're very easily treatable.
All right.
But the depressive disorder is generally a longer term disorder.
Okay.
You do not stop going to your cardiologist. Professor Saab, you want to say something?
I want to say something that this is very important. Akmal has very beautifully described in a very succinct way that our society is not psychologized. In England, where he practices, where I was trained, people come and they talk about depression. Here they won't come and say, because to talk about depression, saying I'm depressed, they feel that I'm weak.
Yeah.
We use somatic language, as Akmal was saying about irritable bowel syndrome, pains and aches and stomach aches. So I think that they present here 70 to 80% in my clinical experience. They present with bodily complaints. And they have been to physicians, they had endoscopy and God knows which investigations. And I'm sorry to say, I'm very ashamed at my age that health professionals have become very, very commercial.
Yeah.
And they are doing unnecessary endoscopies.
And then they're just
But
going
they are
on about it.
depressed.
Yes, exactly.
They can be very eminently treated.
Okay, now there's one thing, sir, which I wanted to ask, and that is that most of the time what happens that, since the time we start to grow up, the nurturing is happening, and so the focus is on the intelligence quotient too as well. And quite a lot of times our emotions get neglected because of the fact that nobody pays heed to that as well. So how do you think, because boys, for example, are taught not to cry. Now, for holding one emotion within your own self or one feeling, do you think that that can be a cause
You
towards
have
anxiety?
raised a very, very important point.
Thank you.
I'm so glad. These days I am saying it. Do you know the definition of health, Shahzad?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
And you taught it to me as well. According to World Health Organization, it's your mental, physical, and spiritual
Anyway,
health.
so you talked about IQ.
Yeah.
And Akmal will bear me out. I have gone further, Akmal.
Sir.
There is intelligence quotient.
Yeah.
There is emotional quotient. There is social quotient. There is moral quotient. And then finally there is a spiritual quotient. So health is a state of physical, mental, social, moral, and spiritual well-being. I think this is extremely important.
Okay.
Because you may have a very high IQ, and if you don't have at the same level emotional quotient, social quotient, moral quotient, and spiritual quotient, you are not healthy. And you get into these conflicts, and then you present with somatic bodily complaints, and people start giving them antibiotics, antacids, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I've noticed one thing. In Pakistan, we have a lot of antibiotics. People take antibiotics like they're candy, so it's really bad for you guys.
And you have to take it for 5 days at least.
It's really bad. Anyway, so now, so let's talk about this within Pakistan. Like, it comes out in different forms. Like we're saying that people will complain of physical illnesses. They'll go to the spiritual leader. But this, I mean, like you're saying, this has to stop now because, as Dr. Mubashir has very rightly pointed out, the projection is very bleak. People are going to be killing themselves. It goes against, your moral upbringing, goes against your religious upbringing. Now, if it goes against all these things that you are taught, which you are genetically averse to, and then these are the actions that you are taking as a result of not treating it, how do we get to that point where we are psychologized, because when you have literacy and education levels are so low within the country, how do we expect things to get better? Dr. Akmal.
So what we have is, of course, a differential where you should be and where you are. So let's look at certain other aspects of the modern world.
Okay.
Because, you know, that's where we're heading, aren't we? So if we want a nice car, we also need to have nice treatment for depressive disorders. But for that, we need to have the education to identify it ourselves.
Okay.
So as Professor said, the somatization or the body expression of the mind, as Shahzad, you described that you heard something, it was emotionally upsetting, and it translated as a language of the heart attack, right? It wasn't a heart attack, but the emotions got translated. In United Kingdom, the unexplained medical symptoms, so that's a title, is one of the largest health expenditures as it is in Pakistan. So even in a developed community where literacy is like, you know, going through the roof and so on, the issue is that still the understanding of the emotional pain and torture is not there completely.
Right.
Now, you talked of it is against our spiritual, against our genetic, against our social training. It isn't actually.
Oh, okay.
Right? So the thing is that there is a religious verse which says, Allah bi zikrillahi tatma'innul qulub, that indeed, verily, with God's mention, you get contentment of the heart. So if God is talking of contentment, God is clearly telling you that there are states of discontent, and your verses are rife with that. And that is why the Islamic focus on mental well-being was far, far ahead by centuries compared to their European counterparts.
Yes.
When Europeans were burning their mad women as witches in Europe, in thousands in Germany and in England and elsewhere, the old demented women, Muslims were treating them with music therapy. They were treating them in the houses of the innocent. What you determined in the MacNaughton rules in the 19th century, that person with a mental defect cannot be held entirely responsible for the crime he commits, is clearly determined in Islamic jurisprudence, established by in the first state of Medina by the Holy Prophet himself. That somebody who's asleep, somebody who's a child and who's mentally infirm cannot be held guilty. So the point is that when you have a spiritual training which says focus on your mind, what is prayer? Focus of your mind on God, on spirituality, on your acts.
Okay.
So, and the other thing is genetics. These are genetic disorders. You are as liable to becoming depressed genetically as you are heart disease. Heart disease, what is the greatest determination of heart disease? Your family history. Professor, you want to
Can I
say?
just say,
Please, please.
Akmal has very beautifully, succinctly described this. I want to tell you, okay, there is now a very clear evidence of neurotransmitters, like a diabetic, it's shortage of insulin. Similarly, there are brain neurotransmitters, adrenaline, noradrenaline, 5-hydroxytryptamine, dopamine. It is the disturbance of biochemistry of the brain also. So by going to pee, it doesn't help. It may give some kind of psychological effect. Akmal talked about it. Akmal, this is very, very important, and I'm glad that you raised this issue, and it provides me with an opportunity. Suicide and suicidal attempt. A person commits suicide because he's hopeless, helpless, hapless, and he then decides that life is not worth living. It is a psychological symptom. He makes an attempt. If he dies, it's good for him, or maybe not good for him. But his family continues to remain under, they are questioned, why did he do this? People are arrested. And if he makes a suicidal attempt, he dies, that's all right. But if he survives, so-called attempted suicide, even then he goes to the jail. Only about 4 weeks ago, I went to Senate subcommittee, where one of the our psychiatrists is a senator, Khaja Karim. He invited me, Professor Haroon, and we said that suicidal attempt and suicide is not a crime.
Yeah.
And it was approved,
Great.
but then it went up to the Senate, and somebody in Islamic ideology conference said, no, 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 you can't make it. So I think it's a very important thing for society, for lawmakers to understand that suicidal attempt or successful suicide is not something which is guna.
Yeah.
It is an illness.
Yeah.
Okay, we can definitely cater to that as well, but right now what I wanted to ask was that quite a lot of times we do not see things, they're not tangible. And we quite a lot of times say that, okay, people do not want to go to the doctors, because they feel ashamed and whatnot. But as a matter of fact, do you think that medical science has progressed to a level where they can actually say that this is a curable disease
It is.
as well?
It is.
Well, the words which were being used within
I am working in
program were
Pakistan.
different.
Akmal is working in.
No, but this is not what I'm saying. For example, if I've got stomachache, okay, I can go for any kind of scans and whatnot. Okay, brain CT scan, whatnot. But in times when we go for testing of psychological disorders or psychiatric disorders, we do not see anything which is very viable to us that, okay, this might be a problem. So do you think that medical science is actually lacking behind too as well in
No,
this
it's
context?
not. It's not.
Okay.
It is what I call literacy and illiteracy on issues of mental health. That's why this program is extremely important.
Okay.
It is eminently treatable.
Yeah.
Depression is very eminently treatable.
Okay.
But they end up with physicians and surgeons and gynecologists with somatic symptoms, extensive investigations, and patient doesn't
So
get
the
it.
treatments are available?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you talked of cure.
Yeah.
Tell me a single chronic disorder which is curable.
Is
Well,
heart attack curable?
is heart-
CML?
Huh?
CML?
What is CML?
Chronic myelogenous leukemia?
Is it
transplants?
curable?
Is it
It's not
curable?
curable.
It's not good. It's
it
treatable.
relapses.
It relapses.
It can relapse.
No, it can relapse. There are so many other disorders like coronary artery disease, like diabetes, like high blood pressure, right? They're not curable.
Yeah.
So I'm talking of chronic diseases. Even your irritable bowel syndrome is not, arthritis isn't curable.
Yeah.
So like you have these disorders, long-term psychological disorders are treatable. As Professor Saab 3 times said, eminently treatable. They are easiest to diagnose. You say scans. There are 101 internet-based self-checking apps,
Yeah.
right?
Questionnaires.
Which you answer certain questions and it gives you a score, whether you're anxious, depressed, severely depressed, suicidal. And then many apps will tell you what you should do. Go see your general practitioner. No, now you go and see your psychiatrist. In terms of the spiritual healers, now the issue is again cultural. So, and it is also how culture defines illness. So your culture does not define mental disorder.
Yeah.
It doesn't accept that mental disorder exists.
Exactly.
So,
Unfortunately.
yeah, and then the point is that while it exists, the culture does not recognize it. As Professor have said, that suicide is the resultant of a severe genetic, biological, physical,
Social,
mental
psychological.
disorder which society refuses to acknowledge. And this is a brave, sort of attempt on part of the professional to go to the lawmaker and say, transform your view, change the law so society begins to accept it. But there is resistance from certain quarters, and that requires a dialogue.
Okay, so now, because we're really running short of time, so we've talked about the situation, and it's actually quite bleak. It doesn't look so positive for the, the mental health issues. But how do we, okay, so when you're living in a society, in a culture, which is not just over here, actually, people even abroad, even in UK, they are a bit resistant to accept the mental health thing as a part of life. It's still seen as abnormal. People still judge you a little bit. But over here, how do we now empower the people, the women, the husbands, the sons, the daughters that are struggling? Because what people don't realize is when someone goes to the extent to take their life, I mean, the amount of pain, the amount of suffering, one can't even imagine.
I will give you an example. When I started working with Professor Saab as a young novice into, not yet a novice, just a greenhorn there.
He has a very heavy psychiatric, psychological genetics.
That's true. So with that load, I went to Professor Saab. And one thing I learned was simple message of education. He would go to places and declare on banners, Jinn, Bhoot, Pareet, Saya, Aseb, Zehni Amraz hain. Now that's a simple educational message. Now many people say no, many people say maybe, many people say yes, right? Now these messages need to go. And this was not from a social worker. This was from a health professional who is there to actually prescribe and treat individuals. But the role of the health professional in this society where there is lack of knowledge has become so wide that they are doing what he started to do 43 years ago or before.
Okay.
But it's absolutely a great message as well.
Yes, so let's have a positive. So
yeah, I'm going to come to that
everyone
point.
behind me depressed
But you know what
today.
I wanted to say over here, that you only accept these messages when you have somebody not to tell you that ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਘਰ ਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਕੁੜੀ ਹੈ ਸਰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹਰਕਤ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, and why is it always women who are doing it too? But now the final question over here is, by 2020 you said that it's going to be the second largest killer.
Yes.
How do we stop it?
I think public awareness.
Okay.
This program will be probably bring a breakthrough. People will know it's an illness, eminently treatable,
Yes,
with cheap, cost-effective drugs,
Absolutely.
and little bit of psychosocial support
Very nice.
around family, friends, to understand that this man needs support and help
Exactly.
with antidepressants or anti-anxiety. And I think it will save a lot of...
and you can bring in faith healers into it.
Yes.
You can bring them in.
You
It
can
is
bring
actually
teachers into it.
yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Anybody who can help.
Yep, so we run out of time. Thank you
Mental
so
health for all for mental health.
Yeah, absolutely.
All for one for all.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you
Well,
so
but
much.
that's it, yeah,
Thank
that's
you
the
so
message.
Okay, that's the message as well. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And guys, I know it wasn't the happiest of subjects today, but it's something that we have to discuss because it is 1 in 3 people are suffering from it. By 2020 will be the biggest killer. And within Pakistan, we have to accept that these things exist, but we are all here for you.
Exactly. So if you want any more information, you can always write to us on our Facebook fan page, which is with the name of
Well, this morning.
on Twitter,
Well, this morning without a
on
G.
Daily Motion and YouTube.
Well, this morning.
And this fabulous city is going to be at.
11:05 p.m., 11 p.m. in the evening. Be good, be safe.
Till the next time, 1, 2, 3.
Good morning.
Yes, it is.